In 1993, 85 people at Berkeley were wired to instruments and shown a film designed to discuss them. Half were told to watch it normally. The other half were told to watch it while behaving so that nobody looking at them would know they were feeling anything. Keep the face still. Give nothing away. It worked in the sense that they gave nothing away. James Gross and Robert Levinson found the suppressors showed less expression, exactly as instructed. Their cardiovascular systems told a different story. Sympathetic activation went up. The body worked harder, not less. And here's the part that matters. Their reported experience of disgust did not drop at all. They felt precisely the same thing, paid more for it physically, and looked calm while doing it. That is fact one. And it demolishes what most people think Stoicism is. 6 more are coming, and number 6 is the one that quietly explains why almost nobody sticks with any of this. 2. You cannot decide not to think about something. Try not to think of a white bear. Daniel Wegner ran that instruction as an experiment in 1987. People asked to suppress a thought reported it surfacing repeatedly during suppression, and in some conditions it came back harder afterwards than for people who were never told to avoid it. He called the mechanism ironic process. Part of your mind has to keep checking whether you're thinking the forbidden thought, and the checking keeps summoning it. So take those 2 findings together, and you get the thing that Stoicism actually says, as opposed to what the internet says it says. Epictetus taught his students that impressions arrive on their own. The thought turns up, the flare of anger turns up, the grief turns up, and none of that is up to you. What is up to you is what you do next, whether you assent to it, argue with it, or let it pass through without acting. Modern Stoicism gets sold as a blank face and a locked jaw. That is expressive suppression. The thing the Berkeley study showed costs more and delivers less. The original was never about not feeling it. It was about not being governed by it. 3. Whatever you're dreading will hurt less than you think. Daniel Gilbert, Tim Wilson, and colleagues ran a series of studies in the late 90s on what they named the impact bias. They asked people to predict how they would feel after a significant event, then measured how they actually felt when it came. Assistant professors predicted the denial of tenure would leave them badly diminished for years. People predicted the same about romantic breakups and elections going the wrong way. In the follow-ups, the people it happened to were doing considerably better, considerably sooner than they had forecast. The mechanism has a name that is worth carrying around. Gilbert called it the psychological immune system, a set of processes that quietly reframe bad outcomes without your permission, and largely without your noticing. The Stoics arrived somewhere adjacent by a different road. Seneca advised rehearsing loss before it happens, imagining exile and poverty and death so they lose the power to ambush you. The practice was later named premeditatio malorum. I want to be careful here. Seneca's exercise has not been tested the way the impact bias has, so treat the pairing as an interesting convergence rather than a validated technique. What both traditions agree on is that the imagined version of a disaster and the lived version are different objects, and you're always negotiating with the imagined one. 4. Getting what you want moves you less than you expect. In 1978, Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff-Bullman published one of the most quoted studies in psychology. They compared major lottery winners with people who had recently become paralyzed in accidents and with a control group. The winners were not dramatically happier than the controls, and they rated everyday pleasures lower. The accident victims were less happy than controls, but by a smaller margin than almost anyone predicts. Now the caveat, because the popular version of this study is badly overstated. The samples were tiny. 22 winners and 29 accident victims, and later long-running research by Richard Lucas and others found that adaptation to serious life events is often incomplete. People do not simply return to a fixed set point. Disability in particular can lower well-being durably. So the honest version is smaller and still striking. We adapt more than we expect, and less completely than the slogan claims. Seneca had no data and got the practical part right anyway. He kept insisting that fortune gives nothing that fortune cannot take back, and that anyone whose contentment sits inside external circumstances has handed the keys to a stranger. 5. Nothing is as important as it feels while you're thinking about it. David Schade and Daniel Kahneman asked students in the Midwest and in California to rate their own life satisfaction, and to predict the life satisfaction of a student in the other region. Everyone predicted Californians would be substantially happier. Sunshine, beaches, the obvious answer. The actual reported satisfaction of the two groups was about the same. What went wrong in the prediction is that thinking about California forces climate to the front of the mind, where it dominates the judgment. In an actual Tuesday, climate is background and coursework and money and relationships are foreground. Kahneman summarized the principle later, and it is worth memorizing. Nothing in life is quite as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. Marcus Aurelius spent a lot of the meditations doing something structurally similar to himself. He would take the thing looming over his day, describe it plainly and without decoration, and watch it shrink to its real size. Strip the story off the event, and what remains is usually smaller and more manageable than the version that was running. 6. You're convinced you have finished changing and you're wrong. This is the one that explains why people abandon philosophy after a fortnight. Jordi Koidbach, Daniel Gilbert, and Tim Wilson surveyed more than 19,000 adults in 2013. They asked some how much their personality values and preferences had changed over the past decade, and asked others how much they expected to change over the next decade. At every age they tested, from 18 to 68, people reported having changed a great deal and predicted they would change relatively little. Gilbert named it the end of history illusion. Everyone believes they have just now arrived at the finished version of themselves, which is a strange belief to hold, given that you have been wrong about it your entire life. The Stoics organized their whole system around the opposite assumption. Epictetus taught progress rather than arrival, and describes the student as somebody in training rather than somebody who has completed something. Marcus was still writing corrective notes to himself in his 50s as an emperor, which is not the behavior of a man who thinks the work is finished. 7. The most famous psychological claim about death does not replicate. I could have ended with a tidy one. This is better. For decades, terror management theory has held that reminding people of their mortality causes them to defend their worldview more strongly. It generated hundreds of studies, and it became one of the best-known ideas in social psychology. In 2019, a project called Many Labs 4 attempted to replicate the classic version of the effect. 21 laboratories, more than 2,000 participants. Original authors consulted on the design. They could not reproduce the finding under any conditions. Some researchers have since criticized aspects of that replication, and the debate continues, but the result is a serious challenge to a foundational claim. So here's what I am not going to do. I'm not going to tell you that science has proven the Stoics right about death. Memento mori was never a laboratory result. It was a practice, and its claim is different from the one being tested. The Stoics were not arguing that thinking about death makes people defend their nation more fiercely. They were arguing that a person who has genuinely accepted their own finitude wastes less time, forgives faster, and is harder to threaten. That claim has not been tested properly. It might not be testable in that form. And the fact that I cannot hand you a study for it is exactly why it belongs at the end of this list. Look at what these 7 actually add up to. 2 of them cut against the version of Stoicism that gets sold in 15-second clips. Holding your face still is not the practice, and it costs you physically. Deciding not to think about something is not available to you as an option. 3 of them describe a mind that is systematically wrong about its own future. Wrong about how long pain lasts, wrong about how much winning helps, wrong about how much it is still going to change. And the last one is a reminder that a philosophy is not made true by a psychology paper, and is not made false by a failed replication either. They are answering different questions. The Stoics had one central move, and every fact on this list touches it. Some things are up to you, and most things are not, and almost all human suffering comes from getting that line in the wrong place. What the research adds is that the line is not where you think it is. Your first reaction is not up to you. Your face going still does not help. The dread is a poor forecast, but what you do in the next 30 seconds, after the impression has arrived and before you have acted on it, is entirely yours. And that gap is smaller and more powerful than most people ever use. That is the cue most people miss. Which of the 7 landed hardest for you? Leave it in the comments, subscribe to Psychology Q, and I will keep showing you the signals hiding in plain sight.